Well, well, well. It looks like hell has frozen over. What do I mean? So there's an opinion piece in the Daily Mail written by somebody called Claudia Connell. And I think it may be one of the most remarkable pieces of self-awareness to appear in that publication. And I think it needs to be looked at. So this woman, Claudia, has written a column criticizing, yes, I know, shock horror, criticizing the other brother and the other girl for their anniversary photograph. And she said that their anniversary photograph of them and their children lying in grass by a hillside, barefoot, on the ground. So essentially that photo is staged and inauthentic. And Claudia says that the Barefoot family on the grass in Cornwall is all a bit Meghan. Yes, I know. Remember we all said that, and I said it yesterday in a video I did, that this is the problem with the Wales. They copy and they copy amiss. They are like people who copy your schoolwork or they copy your exam answers and they still fail. And they still fail. And Claudia said that kind of photo is a sort of thing expected from a Californian former lifestyle blogger, fond of using phrases about living authentically and speaking my truth and thriving, not surviving, and that Harry and Meghan have 8 years of form with Barefoot on the beach and Love Heart in the sand. And then she writes this sentence: "Oh, how we mocked them for it too. Oh, how we mocked them." Imagine. So it tells you that these people know exactly what they're doing. So Harry and Meghan doing their own thing. They're not inviting the world to do it with them. They're not saying, I've done it, therefore you must do it. They're doing what they do. This is how they live their life. If they want to go around walking barefoot, that's their problem. Not my, nothing to do with me. If I don't like it, I can always scroll past. But they decided to mock Harry and Meghan for 8 good years, only for the other brother and the other girl to turn around and try to copy. And they copied so badly. It was awful. The poses were terrible. I mean, somebody scrutinized them, and there are things I cannot say on this video because I do not want to get driven off this platform. But honestly, I never thought I would see the day where the Daily Mail would mock the other brother and the other girl for copying their more successful for copying the more successful Montecito royals. But anyway, let me carry on. So the Daily Mail, this is the publication, as you know, that runs around 70 to God knows how many stories on Meghan in 19 days. The publication that published the prop sentence about children with cancer, because they said Harry and Meghan were using those children as props. The publication that described her birthday candles for children as disgusting. The publication that ran a shop her look piece at 6:43 in the morning, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they were abusing her for doing the same. And this is a publication whose columnist, Sarah Vine, described Meghan as monetizing her own misery. That to me is a projection, because Sarah Vine is the one who's monetized everything from her lack of hair to her fat self to her husband leaving her. She has monetized everything I know about her. I know against my will. And you can tell that woman is miserable right from childhood up till now. Oh, and by the way, she gets a mention in my book as well, the book I'm writing right now, and you would see why. But the problem is that the author of this piece, Claudia, is now saying that, well, you made us make fun of Harry and Meghan, and because we made fun of Harry and Meghan for doing it, now I'm being forced to make fun of you two. That is essentially what her article is saying. So the column, funnily enough, I believe is making a legitimate observation, because at the end of the day, the photograph is clearly styled. Now, Matt Porteous is someone I know in passing. He's not a friend or anything like that. But, he's spoken at conferences where I've spoken at. And he said hello, I've said hello. And he is a lovely guy. He is a genuinely lovely guy. However, the fact that they hired a professional photographer means that the imagery did not happen by accident. The children's clothes are complementary, so they've matchy, as they usually do. The angles are very considered, and the aerial perspective is either a drone or a ladder or a tree. And one of the children's expressions suggests that they're like, oh my God, how much longer do we have to stay like this? And whereas, this is the thing, you see, you cannot fake authenticity. Whereas with the Sussexes, when they take their photos of their children, it's either the backs of the heads, etc., but it was taken in the moment. There is something, I don't want to say dynamic, there's something live about that quality, right? When they take photos of their children. But with the other brother and their kids, everything is posed and placed. And people sense that, and people know that. And even one of their ardent supporters, Claudia, has now been forced to call them out. Now, Claudia's observation that the photo is all a bit Meghan, in my opinion, is probably the most honest thing that the Daily Mail has published, because when they compare both couples, it's always about, how Meghan is wanting and how Meghan is this and and the other girl is perfect and blah, 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 blah. But the problem is that the other girl is now slipping in their estimation, because remember, she did all these Mother Nature videos, right? And she used phrases like interconnectedness and renewal and resilience. And she did all that because she thought it's the sort of thing that Meghan will do. And this is the thing about copying with no sense. At least try and put your own spin on it. Because we know this girl cannot speak. It probably took her several takes. This is someone, all she had to do was lay a wreath at the cenotaph. And she managed to turn her back to the cenotaph. So at the end of the day, they know that the other girl is simply not capable. So what the column cannot quite bring itself to do, in my opinion, is complete the logical conclusion of its own argument, because you're making an argument that, that's all a bit Montecito, it's all a bit Meghan. Complete the argument. Because if the Barefoot photographs of the other brother and the other girl and their children are inauthentic, to do them means that they are copying an aesthetic that Harry and Meghan developed, right? And it's this aesthetic is what the publication, the Daily Mail, spent the last 8 years mocking. So the copying is inauthentic precisely because it is copying. The original, as in the original owners of that aesthetic, that is genuine. Just because I do not like an aesthetic doesn't mean it is inauthentic, right? So, but if somebody else copies that aesthetic, the copiers are the ones who are being inauthentic. So the replication of Meghan's image, a type of imagery for PR purposes, right? Now that is a different argument. Because at the end of the day, you are now admitted that the imagery that is coming out of KP is inauthentic and it's done for PR purposes. And this is a paper that bangs on and on and on and on about things being real. Remember, they did an article where they interviewed the private secretary, And the private secretary was saying, oh, they don't feel the need to be performative, to display their love and to blah, 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 blah. And he was making all sorts of excuses for them. And yet this same family are blatantly copying the Montecito royals. So that it would be the logical conclusion of Claudia's argument. But at the end of the day, she is saying that, we all mocked Meghan for doing it, so why are you doing it? So if you're going to blast them, blast them. If you're going to really blast them, go for them. Go for them with the same gusto that you go for Meghan with. Because at the end of the day, being barefoot in your own garden, in your own backyard, that is your personal choice. And the last I checked, right, there is a freedom of expression. However, somebody else then copying, because we remember their family photos from years back. We remember them sitting on a bale of hay. We remember them stiff and awkward. That is who they are, and they should lean into it. So Claudia, go have a chat with your handlers, overlords, puppet masters, whatever. Leave the Montecito royals out of your mouth and focus on the copiers, because that's what you need to do. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, please. My name's Elizabeth. I'm the author of The Luxpreneur. And for more insights like these, please like, share, comment, and please hit the subscribe button. And to support my work in holding truth to power, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Elizabeth Solaru, or you can get a copy of my book, The Luxpreneur, from Amazon, Waterstones, or Barnes & Noble.
The Daily Mail's hypocrisy, mocking the original and the copy. What strikes one most forcefully about Claudia Connell's column is not merely what it says, but what it so carefully avoids saying. She observes quite correctly that the Wales anniversary photograph is staged and inauthentic, that it mirrors an aesthetic developed and perfected by Harry and Meghan over years of deliberate curation. She notes with barely concealed discomfort that Kate's spring nature video, all plinky spa music and phrases about interconnectedness and resilience, sounds precisely like the content that the Daily Mail has relentlessly mocked when it emanates from Montecito. She even recalls with approval the time when Meghan's bare feet at Kensington Palace were considered a breach of decorum, yet now she has seen quite enough of the Wales's bare feet to last a lifetime. All of this is accurate observation. But here is where the logic begins to fracture. The column cannot quite bring itself to acknowledge that the Daily Mail itself, the same publication that published approximately 70 stories about Meghan in 19 days, that described her birthday candles as disgusting, that ran competing shop her look and criticism pieces on the same afternoon, is now gently chiding the Wales for copying the very woman it spent years systematically destroying for being authentic. The irony is staggering, almost architectural in its construction. Meghan was mocked for being herself. Kate and William are now being mocked for trying to be Meghan. The original was genuine. The copy is uncomfortable. And the publication enforcing this criticism appears entirely oblivious to the fact that it is the architect of this very problem. The Daily Mail's criticism of the Wales anniversary photo, Claudia Connell has penned a scathing column that tears into the Wales anniversary photograph for its staged, carefully constructed nature and its fundamental inauthenticity. She argues that the image of the Barefoot family arranged across the Cornish grass is unmistakably derivative, a wholesale adoption of what one might call the Meghan aesthetic, precisely the sort of polished, carefully curated content one would expect from a Californian former lifestyle blogger who traffics in phrases about living authentically and speaking one's truth, about thriving rather than surviving. Connell points out that Harry and Meghan have spent 8 years establishing a recognisable pattern with their barefoot beach photographs and carefully composed, sand-written sentiments, content that the Daily Mail itself has spent years mocking with what appeared to be genuine disdain. Yet here is where the column becomes particularly uncomfortable. Connell notes that Kate's recent Spring Nature video, complete with its spa-like musical accompaniment and talk of interconnectedness and renewal and resilience, sounds precisely like the kind of content that has been relentlessly ridiculed whenever it has emerged from Montecito. The observation is both fair and damning, that the Wales have adopted not only the aesthetic but the entire emotional vocabulary of the Sussexes, and in doing so have exposed themselves to the very criticism that the Daily Mail itself pioneered, a criticism that now boomerangs back with uncomfortable force. Years of relentless mockery of Meghan, the Daily Mail, that same publication which managed to run approximately 70 stories about Meghan in just 19 days, now finds itself in the peculiar position of critiquing the very aesthetic it spent years tearing apart. This is the same newspaper that published contradictory pieces with stunning regularity. A Shop Her Look feature at 6:43 in the morning, followed by a scathing criticism of the identical outfit at 1 in the afternoon. This is the publication whose columnists, like Sarah Vine, described Meghan as monetising her own misery, reducing her most personal moments to mere commercial transactions. And yet, having spent years mocking the barefoot photographs, the sunset imagery, the carefully composed family moments that defined Harry and Meghan's visual language, the Daily Mail now watches as Kate and William adopt these very same techniques, the professional photographers, the styled clothing, the considered angles, and finds itself compelled to note, with barely concealed discomfort, that perhaps this path of imitation is leading somewhere unfortunate. The irony appears entirely lost on those who commissioned these pieces, that the publication which enforced the mockery of the original is now gently suggesting that the copy does not quite work. The uncomfortable truth. Connell admits. What makes Connell's column particularly striking is the admission buried within its criticism, that Kate and William are now engaging in the very aesthetic choices the Daily Mail spent years ridiculing when Meghan employed them. The Wales anniversary photograph is undeniably a carefully constructed composition, professional in every measurable way. Matt Porteous did not stumble upon them mid-laugh in the Cornish grass. The children's coordinating earth tones were selected with intention, the angles calculated, the barefoot styling deliberate. The publication's own columnist acknowledges what has become impossible to ignore. This is precisely a bit Meghan, to borrow Connell's phrase, the kind of lifestyle content featuring spring renewal, interconnectedness, and carefully curated authenticity that the Daily Mail has spent years mocking when it originated from California. The irony cuts deep because Connell is essentially confessing that the original criticism was not about the aesthetic itself being inherently inauthentic or undesirable, but rather about who was wielding it and from where. Now that Kate and William have adopted the barefoot on grass formula, the same publication finds itself in the awkward position of having to criticise not the style itself, but the fact of its imitation. The Daily Mail cannot quite articulate this logical conclusion without undermining years of relentless mockery of Meghan for doing the very same thing, and doing it arguably with considerably more genuine cultural impact. The unavoidable truth that dare not speak its name. The column circles the drain of its own logic without ever quite plunging down it. If we follow Connell's argument to its natural conclusion, the one that sits there, obvious and undeniable, waiting to be acknowledged, we arrive at something the Daily Mail has spent years actively avoiding. Meghan was mocked for authenticity, while Kate and William are now being mocked for imitation. The original Barefoot family on the grass, the unpolished moments, the conscious choice to present a certain version of oneself to the world, that was genuine because it emerged from somewhere true, even if it was carefully curated for public consumption. The replication, by contrast, carries an entirely different weight. When you are copying an aesthetic that has already been established, already been mocked, already been thoroughly documented by the very publication now criticizing its pale reproduction, the gesture becomes something else entirely. It becomes performance of performance. The drone footage, the professional photographer, the complementary wardrobes, these are not accidents of authenticity, but calculated choices to echo what has come before. And therein lies the fundamental insincerity that Connell identifies but cannot quite name. The copy is inauthentic precisely because it is copying. The replication for PR purposes does not carry the same quality as the original. One emerged from a place of self-expression, however mediated by publicists and stylists. The other emerged from a desire to borrow someone else's established brand of relatability, to wear someone else's carefully constructed version of being real. The distinction matters. The Daily Mail understands this distinction, and yet it refuses to speak it aloud. The irony of the Daily Mail's position. The Daily Mail spent years relentlessly enforcing criticism of Meghan's barefoot aesthetic, running countless pieces that mocked her casual, nature-adjacent styling and her carefully curated authenticity. Every barefoot photograph, every candid moment on the beach, every wooden deck appearance became fodder for derision. The publication that publishes approximately 70 stories about her in 19 days found endless material in what they deemed performative casualness. Yet now, as Kate and William adopt that very same aesthetic for their anniversary photographs and spring nature videos, the same publication has pivoted to gently mocking the Waleses for embracing the style they once scorned. Claudia Connell's column makes a legitimate observation. The Wales imagery is styled, professional, calculated, all the things they accuse Meghan of being. Both observations are correct. The bare feet in Cornwall are staged. The plinky spa music and language of renewal and resilience are borrowed from the Montecito playbook. But what makes the hypocrisy glaring, what transforms a fair critique into something darker, is the source making it. The publication that spent years weaponizing criticism of the original against Meghan now finds itself in the uncomfortable position of criticizing the copy that belongs to the heirs to the throne. The irony sits heavy and unacknowledged. The Daily Mail mocked the authentic, mocked the imitation, and apparently failed to notice that it was the inconsistency itself that revealed everything. The authentic versus the calculated. The irony sits heavy here. While the Daily Mail spent years deriding Meghan and Harry's Montecito lifestyle as performative and rehearsed, they now find themselves confronting the uncomfortable truth that authenticity, once mocked, becomes difficult to replicate. Harry and Meghan continue to generate staggering media impact, $51.6 million in 4 days, not through the orchestration of professional photographers or the careful coordination of complementary wardrobes, but through the simple act of living their lives as they choose to live them. Their barefoot walks on the beach, their candid moments in California's golden light, their unfiltered documentation of family life emerged organically from their own aesthetic values, developed without regard for the approval of institutions that would later criticize them for the very thing they now attempt to copy. The Wales's recent pivot toward this same visual language, the nature videos with their whispered wellness language, the professionally styled family portraits shot by accomplished photographers, the calculated barefoot moments, carries an entirely different weight because it is, by definition, imitation. The original carries the unmistakable mark of genuine living. The copy, no matter how skillfully executed, bears the fingerprints of strategic repositioning. What the Daily Mail struggles to articulate in Connell's column is that you cannot mock someone for being themselves and then applaud someone else for pretending to be that same person. The path toward authenticity cannot be walked in borrowed shoes. The unacknowledged hypocrisy. The Daily Mail's editors appear genuinely oblivious to the contradiction embedded within their own column. Claudia Connell has written a piece that simultaneously mocks both the original and the copy, revealing a fundamental inconsistency that undermines the publication's entire narrative. She criticizes Kate and William for adopting the barefoot in nature aesthetic that Harry and Meghan pioneered, yet fails to acknowledge, or perhaps deliberately ignores, that the Daily Mail spent years viciously attacking Meghan for doing precisely the same thing. The publication that published approximately 70 stories about Meghan in 19 days, that described her birthday candles as disgusting, that ran a shop her look piece and a criticism piece on the same day, is now gently chiding the Wales for treading down a path that leads to Montecito. This contradiction is not a subtle oversight. It is a glaring inconsistency that reveals how the Daily Mail's credibility has been systematically undermined by its own contradictory narratives. The magazine cannot simultaneously claim that barefoot photographs are inauthentic when executed by one couple while being entirely acceptable, or at least worth mocking, when executed by another without exposing the arbitrary nature of its criticism. The fact that these editors commissioned a piece acknowledging their own years of mockery without seeming to grasp the irony of their position suggests either willful blindness or a complete disregard for consistency in editorial standards.